All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the San Anselmo Library's virtual event this evening, Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change. I'm Sariana, the Adult Services Librarian at the San Anselmo Library. And before we begin, I would like to thank the Friends of the Library and the Library Parcel Tax for sponsoring this program and all library programs. There are a few technical things I'd like to mention before we begin. Everyone will remain muted until the end of the presentation. If you have a question for Rob or Nita, please type it into the chat box at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on where you have the function located and what device you are using. Library staff will be monitoring the chat and we will alert our speakers to any questions received there. I recommend selecting the full screen and speaker view settings. This can be found in the top right corner of your screen or on the left-hand side, depending on your device. During the presentation, you might see some faces on the right side in a column. You can choose to minimize this column to just show the speaker's face using the horizontal lines at the top of that column. We are recording this event tonight, and I will share the link with everyone registered tomorrow, as well as upload the recording to the San Anselmo Library's YouTube channel. For other events that we have inside the library, we normally have a book sale, and unfortunately we can't have that tonight because we are virtual. However, this beautiful book we will be hearing about tonight is available to purchase online at www.wildflowerbook.com. I will share this link in the chat box. And thank you for your patience and understanding during this program. We are all still learning the ins and outs of Zoom. If you have any questions or need help with Zoom, email me at sleyland@townofsananselmo.org. It's the same email you used to register for the event, or you can use the chat box and send me a personal chat. Please join me in welcoming Rob Badger and Nita Winter.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I hope you had an easy time finding parking. And we are so grateful for all of you who showed up. Thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, this is our first virtual presentation since COVID interrupted our in-person ones that were happening around the state. We unfortunately had to cancel a lot of them around the 5th anniversary of Earth Day. 50th anniversary, excuse me. 50th anniversary of Earth Day that we were really looking forward to. But we're glad that we're healthy and safe and glad to see you all and hope everybody else is as well. And so we look forward to doing the presentation tonight. I can't see us big, Sariana. I don't know if anyone else. Frank, are you seeing us big or small? Can you, I can't.
So for, so to make people big, you have to change, it's the speaker view settings on the top right corner of your screen. If you see tiles, that's called gallery view. So
Right,
you want speaker view.
You were frozen. While we were talking, you were frozen and we didn't go big like we should have.
Everyone would change that on their own. I did pin the video so that you guys should be the main one that we see.
Okay, so you're seeing us big.
I'm seeing you big.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Oh, that's good.
You guys are big and nice on my screen.
All right, we won't worry about it then. Okay, so I think we'll just get
We can do this
started on the slideshow and take you guys on our 27-year journey. So let's. And yay. Whoops, we should be up there.
Okay. First of all, we're really excited because we have won some wonderful awards. A Benjamin Franklin Award, which is put on by the International Book Publishers, the Independent Book Publishers Association.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt you guys, but this is the speaker version of the slideshow, not the slideshow you guys showed me earlier.
This is the one we showed earlier. What are you seeing?
I am seeing the navigation side, not the slideshow presentation side.
That's strange.
It's a view. Oh, thank you, Susan Kronk. It's a view setting.
For you?
And no, I think it's on your screen. But let's start over. I'm sorry. You can. Sorry, I'll just be quiet over here.
Well, now let us know if there are any problems. You are sharing. Okay, so if I go to play, you're seeing my monitor now, correct?
And are you seeing all the slides? So are you seeing now just the image?
I'm seeing two images, not just the single image. Is that what you want? We're seeing the current slide and then the next slide.
We did test it. She didn't see it before.
We tested this.
Yeah, we tested it and it worked fine.
Oh. Okay.
Now are you seeing just one?
I'm seeing two. Oh.
Okay, now let me go back to play. We turned off the other monitor. Now is it working?
Okay, it looks like maybe I'm seeing what everyone's supposed to see. They're seeing your book and your faces. So, okay, maybe it's just on my side. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, everybody.
Oh, well.
I'm going to be.
We're all learning. This is the first
We are all learning. I'm learning something new today. Okay.
Okay. So we wanted to take you all on our 27-year journey that led up to bringing you our book, Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change. And so we can tell you how it all started. Way back in 1994, I was photographing film. I was at a lab and getting my film processed, and a friend of mine who was a nature photographer said, and this was springtime, she said, you know, the Antelope Valley, California Poppy Reserve, which you see here, is just having a beautiful year. I imagine you've been down there and photographed it. I said, no. She said, really? You're a landscape photographer? You're a California landscape photographer? You've never photographed the Poppy Reserve? I said, no, I'm kind of shy. And she said, you've got to go down. So she and another photographer and I went down, and we saw this really incredible bloom. The Antelope Valley, California Poppy Reserve is about an hour north of Los Angeles in the westernmost part of the Mojave Desert. So this was an exceptional year in that not only was it a good poppy bloom, but there were all these beautiful purple bird's eye gilia that you see here. So normally there's just a lot of poppies, which is beautiful in itself because it's so orange, but this year there was a great variety of flowers. So I called Nita the first evening I was down there, and I said, this is incredible. You and I have never seen anything like this. You have to see this. So I drove back home all the way to San Francisco, came back down here, and we spent, how many days? Like 3 or 4 days photographing this. Nita was between assignments. So this is how it all started. And from that, I started thinking about doing more floral landscapes because I just love the desert. And this was one of the most beautiful parts of the desert that I had seen with flowers in it. So that's how this all started.
And Rob and I both grew up in the Northeast, and we don't have wildflower blooms like California does. So Rob and I met in 1986 in a photo lab. I was waiting for my prints, and he showed up, my new prints. And at the time, I was a people photographer. I had done a series on the children of the Tenderloin and was focused on people, and Rob was a nature photographer and focused on the beautiful landscapes. 6 couples counselors later, we began to combine our efforts and work on the Wildflower Project together. And
so this was this is the oldest image in the book. It was taken in 1986, and at that time I was looking for a beautiful portrait of a tree at sunset, and I happened to find all these flowers in there. But I still hadn't thought about specializing in just flowers. So again, this is the earliest taken image in the book. It was on film, and it was 2 years before I had even met Nita.
So, I'm so sorry to interrupt you guys. We've gotten some things in the chatter. We're seeing the 2 slides. We're not seeing the large photos, the large images that we practiced earlier. I'm not sure what happened.
I don't know.
I thought it was just me, but now I'm hearing from other people that it's not.
All right, so we're going to stop sharing.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well, we are too.
Okay, and now we're going to share the screen.
Yes.
And let me make sure I'm. That's the one that you should be sharing. Oh, wait a minute, maybe desktop. And then play.
How's that look?
Is that better?
That's it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay,
No,
you
it's
guys,
okay.
you all get your money refunded.
Should we start over?
We can go back to them at the end of, we can go back if we want to, but let's keep going. You guys are telling a really
Okay,
great story.
yeah, we'll keep going. Thank you.
So you were saying this was your earliest image?
Yeah. And as Nita said, when she met me, I was a landscape photographer. I'd been doing that for 20 years, and after doing it for that long, I was wanting to do something with everything I had learned and my talent to do something more than just take pretty pictures of national parks. So I was fortunate to be hired by the Trust for Public Land, and I photographed over 30 of their conservation projects. This is a project image. It was taken in the Sierra Nevada foothills. This land, when I photographed this TPL project, was privately held ranch land that through TPL's efforts was eventually converted to Sequoia National Park. So this is where my conservation work really started. I was fortunate to have an organization that hired me to go out to these beautiful places and photograph some of the beautiful lands all across the Western U.S. At that time, I was also working on environmental projects. This is part of a series I did. I gave a slideshow at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. During the Clinton administration, when the Clinton administration was trying to get through mining law reform. So I photographed what was happening on our public lands, all the mining that was being done on sites across the West. So I was fortunate to do some aerial photography. And I also worked on other environmental issues, including water issues. And the more I did this, the more depressed I got with what was going on. And I reached some point after doing this for a bunch of years to decide, well, I want to show the beauty of the land. I want to help promote conservation efforts. And so I started thinking more and more about what I could do with beautiful images to promote those goals.
And I was, when I first came out to California, I became a firefighter for CDF, and I was stationed up in Leggett. And I always had a camera on my belt. And then I spent a number of years working at the Women's Building in San Francisco, and was always photographing and really wanted to do it full time. So I quit my job there and became a freelance photographer And the first big project I did, which is the image on the right, was on the children of the Tenderloin. And it really introduced me to the power of photography and what it can do to make a difference. I also did images for the Children's Defense Fund Council and worked with a really talented local artist, Taya Schrack, to do the hand coloring for their calendars. And over the years, I started doing the Faces projects, the Faces of Marin City, of the Canal, Novato and Vallejo, which were projects that celebrated diversity, and we created 7-foot banners that hung in the streets and in the shopping centers to celebrate the diversity found in different communities. And when I finished the Canal project, I had some health issues, and so I had to back off on the work I was doing. And that actually, since I wasn't doing assignments anymore, that actually allowed me to go out in the field more with Rob. And we started to team up and photograph the wildflowers together.
So this image was taken around the area of Carson Pass, where, if you know, that is, it's near Kirkwood ski area in the Sierra. We decided that we were going to go spend about 4 or 5 days. So I hiked in 85 pounds of gear. Nita hiked in 65 pounds of gear. And it was the first work we really did where we were not only doing landscapes, but now because I had a digital camera and I could see what I was getting on the back of the camera. Again, this was probably 2006. Now I could do more portraits of plants and immediately see what it was I was getting, and not waiting to have to go to a lab to see that my lighting was right and my composition was right. So that's how digital photography helped evolve our wildflower photography.
And sometimes we'd go out for 3 weeks at a time, a month at a time, when the flowers were really good. And in order to be able to afford to do the work we were doing, we started connecting with art consultants and architects who were building medical facilities. And we were really fortunate to have this project at Kaiser Redwood City Medical Center, where 34 images were built into the architecture. And so this is one of 7 dividers by the elevators that were backlit by the windows. And they're 8 feet tall by 20 feet wide. And at times of the year, there aren't very many wildflowers, so we decided to photograph birds. And we've often called birds flying wildflowers. And this is at the Merced National Wildlife Refuge. And these images were again used in healthcare.
So people often ask us, what are the most beautiful blooms you've seen? Where were they? When were they? This was probably the best wildflower experience we've ever had. There's an area above the town of Gorman, which is around Tejon Pass. If you're going to Los Angeles, you go down through the valley and you go up over the top of the Grapevine. At the top of the Grapevine is a place called Peace Valley. Well, this year, it was 2003, I was doing film. That's why all the images are pretty much square, because I was using a camera with a square format in it. We were seeing wildflowers from the freeway. Interstate 5 goes through there, from the bottom of the freeway up to the top of the ridges, which was 1,000 feet above the freeway, and it was about 1.5 miles wide, and it was all flowers.
It was amazing.
One of the hardest things to do was to settle on a composition because everything looked so beautiful. So
you want to tell them about Highway 5?
Yeah, so Highway 5 goes down between the ridge you're seeing in the foreground and the hills in the background. The highway is just below the trees at the lower right-hand corner.
And this is the foreground is the west side, and that's public land. And the far side is private land, and it's one of those places that we hope gets protected at some point.
So this is one of that series, and I submitted this image to the BBC and British Museum of Natural History Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. They had a category of nature's landscapes, and so I was fortunate to win an award in that competition.
And the image traveled around the world with the exhibit.
So these are just a few images from that whole series. So this again was in 2003. And then the other really wonderful experience we had was again in 2017 at a national monument called the Carrizo Plain, which is kind of halfway between San Luis Obispo on the coast and Bakersfield in the valley. These are desert candles.
And we had only seen a few of them before this.
Yeah.
And this was just a piece of what we were seeing left and right. It was just amazing. So it's our second favorite wildflower bloom.
And so to give you a perspective on what this bloom was like in the Carrizo Plain, which is the depression between the two mountain ranges on the east and on the west, this is what we saw. Whoops.
So this is the view coming down from the Caliente Mountains, and the Tembler Mountains are the ones in the background.
And so so you're looking east, and Bakersfield would be over those hills, sort of.
And behind us, we're on the Caliente Mountains. You may have heard that the Trump administration just opened oil drilling in the Carrizo Plains National Monument. It's actually behind us. It's not in the flat areas here, but it's behind us.
Way to the south.
Towards the west, on the other side of the Caliente Mountains. What's that point?
New Koyama.
New Koyama Valley. And here's a detail of some of the flowers that are in the valley. It just went for miles.
And so people want to know, how do we photograph? You know, what's our technique? Because when you look at a lot of the individual portraits of the flowers, they look like we picked them and did them in a studio setting, but everything is done outdoors in the field using natural light with the flowers safe and sound in the ground. So there are basically three types of floral portraits. One is, if you look at the upper left image of the yellow sneezeweed, that's a typical botanical portrait with a black background
Or white
background. The next one with the magenta Chinese houses, you can see there's some texture in there. So I started to wrap some of the flowers to give composition with the fabric behind them, to use the folds that helped create a composition that complemented the flowers. And as far as I know, I'm the only one who's done that. It's a lot of work. I went through 6 different kinds of fabric, finding the right fabric. I used chiffon, and a slight breeze can destroy my whole fabric composition, but it's a different way to show the flower with something in the background other than a solid black or a solid white. And then the pink flower on the bottom, it's a checker bloom. I found a way to actually carefully get the flower to touch the lens, so I'm as much in contact with the flower, like I'm touching it, as I can possibly be. I found a way to focus close, so the lens is blocking the light that's falling on the flower. The lens in the camera is blocking that light. So the light that's illuminating the whole scene is coming from behind the flowers. So it gives this sort of translucent, transparent effect to the petals. I do this without a tripod, whereas the other two ways I photograph, everything is, is a precise tripod point of view. This is more spontaneous without using a tripod, and I've got to go through a lot of images to get one that works, because most of them don't, because the flower is moving around as I'm gently touching it. So those are the three different ways that I've been photographing flowers, and as far as I know it, I don't think anyone's doing the whole contact series the way I do it.
And we'll show you more examples.
So this is an image. This took 2.5 hours to do this image. Nita had found the flower the previous evening when the sun was going down. We decided to come back in the morning to have nice low light, but the problem was the sun was coming from a really low angle, so one part of the flower was getting illuminated, the rest was in shade, so we had to find, so we used reflectors to reflect light back into the side that wasn't shaded, and then we had to balance the light. I did about 7 Polaroids, and it took about 2.5 hours till we finally got the right composition. We finally got the right light. So that's an extreme, but we find we average maybe about 45 minutes from the time I take all the gear off my back to the time we take up to get to get the image we want.
Yeah, that's generally the minimum.
Yeah.
It's 45 minutes.
So I wonder if people can
No,
see
they
that.
don't see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just go through and show you some of the setups we've done.
So a lot of them are done in Marin because there's just so much public land here and so many different ecosystems.
And they're all so close. It's only 4 seconds. So we're really careful where we photograph it. It looks like we're going to be disturbing something like the plants next to it. We won't do it. And Nita's really good at finding things. She has a much better eye for finding subtle colors than I do, even though I think I see everything. So we really counted on Nita to find things sometime.
So if you ever see late in the spring, hillsides of pink, it's very often the farewell to spring. And often it can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So this is a film camera that I was using.
It's the Calypso orchids that you can find on Mount Tam.
Nita found this image after the end of a hike. We had to get back home. I came back the next day. It was during the sort of end of the stormy season. This is on the bottom of Ring Mountain in Corte Madera. I set all this up. I used some of the things that I had with me before I really developed what my wildflower lighting pack was going to be. I photographed this in about 3 minutes after I got everything packed up. It started raining like crazy. So there are some times when you're in the springtime and you're here in the Bay Area, you don't know, you can't always plan that you're going to get the weather that you want.
And then we also try to take a common flower and make something different so that they don't all look the same. And one of our favorite trails on Mount Tam for flowers is the old stagecoach road on our way up to West Point Inn. And this flower, if you ever find it, stop and smell the flowers. It's like perfume. It's just really highly scented. It's beautiful. This is Northern California.
And this is a 2-page spread in the book. So almost all the images that you're seeing are in the book. And again, we use only natural light. And so this took a while to arrange the fold so that it complemented the shape of the flower.
That's not the chiffon, though, in this case.
Yeah. But again, I like doing it this way to get away from the solid, could be, solid, boring black background. And we hiked our gear up to 11,000 feet. This is Morgan Pass in the Sierra, the east side of the Sierra.
And in that case, the background would be distracting with the dirt, and so
it was just all rocks and dirt. And the same thing here. So it became a lot of fun to try to do something other than just a straight botanical portrait with either white or black.
And again, Ring Mountain is one of our favorite spots in Marin County for flowers.
This is another contact series. Again, it looks like the light is being transmitted through the flower. This was out at Point Reyes. And this is another contact. So with the contact series, we can get more of an abstract feeling, and I always make sure there are at least a few images there are a few parts of the scene where something's really, really sharp. And sometimes we photograph in direct sunlight with a background behind it, and we'll try the same composition, the same flower, and use a diffuser, something like that, and see what it looks like with soft light on it. And it's a totally different feeling sometimes. Go back to the other one.
So with the sunlight directly on it and with it softened and diffused.
And people always ask, well, how much Photoshop work are you doing? Well, we have to do a lot, because the way the camera sees and the way our eye sees, our eyes adapt to different lighting conditions. For example, this was photographed in the shade under a blue sky. And so this is a raw file. This is how the file looks straight out of the camera. And there was just a little bit of afternoon sunlight in the upper part of the frame in the middle. So the camera recorded the blue light that was falling on the scene. This is what we saw. And so the raw file is a very, very low contrast to make sure that you get in detail in the highlights and you get in detail in the shadows. And then you process the film. You digitally process the raw file to get what my impression was, what it felt like, what I saw. And so you can see what the difference is. Now, when we're doing individual floral portraits, we make sure that we, in processing, keep the true color of what the flowers are. And so this image was done on on Mount Tam, and we had a big sheet on a pole that we placed behind these lilies. And then in Photoshop, what we did is we brightened up the white background so it wasn't distracting. And this is what it looks like. But we make sure that we keep the colors of the flower accurate and not too saturated, because our goal is to show somebody what they would see if they were out in the field seeing what we saw.
And people do ask us whether we take the background out in Photoshop. And as you see, we put the background out in the field, and we just might need to fine tune it So it works, it's cleaner. And this is the 2-page spread that's found in the book with that image. And then here's another example of a wild buckwheat, and the wind was really blowing, so there was sand everywhere, and we didn't have a piece that we had to use 2 pieces to get around this plant, so we had the seam in it. So we go into Photoshop and we clean it up.
And again, the image was that the camera created was a really, really low contrast, low saturation image, and this was what it was we saw.
And again, the 2-page spread.
I guess we got to go a little faster.
So not only do we deal with the wind, but we've also had to deal with bugs. And this is actually in Utah, and it was one of our worst bug experiences. They were coming in everywhere, into our clothes, into our ears. And unfortunately, Rob ended up with about 200 bites all over his body. So
these were no-see-ums.
And we deal with heat, we deal with cold, and getting hungry. So we had been doing this throughout the West, and we became a project of Blue Earth Alliance. And we met Joan Jasper from the San Francisco Public Library and talked to her about our project. And she asked us to create Beauty and the Beast California Wildflowers and Climate Change with California images and with an emphasis on the Bay Area. And this was what began our traveling exhibit, which now has been seen by over 45,000 people. And we just found out last week that for sure it's going to the San Diego Natural History Museum. They're creating their own large print version of the exhibit with an emphasis on Southern California. So we're really excited about that. They're going to be 3 feet and 6 foot prints.
Let me go back and check. So you can see these knee pads in the display case. I found somebody wearing these. Kneeling in these is like kneeling in kind of stiff jello, which has saved my knees for years and years, because for a while I was using gardening knee pads and, you know, anything I could find to protect my knees. But once I found those, I could spend a lot more time kneeling down over the tripod.
And it's by a company called Ergodyne, E-R. We can put it in the chat if you're interested.
They donated knee pads.
So we decided to do a companion coffee table book. People kept asking us if we had one. And we wanted it to be a lot more than a pretty book. The exhibit was about education and inspiring hope and action. So we were fortunate to be able to bring together a really interesting group of scientists, environmental leaders, and nature writers to write short stories that are in the book. And we have 16 authors that wrote 18 short stories. And we were really lucky to get Peter Raven, who's in the upper left, who's a world-renowned botanist and been called the hero for the planet by Time magazine, to write our foreword and the first story about the history of California plants. And he's just been wonderful to work with. All of them were wonderful. So this was a very collaborative project. We've worked with over a dozen organizations and universities to put together this project. And we needed to find a way to organize the book. So it was organized into 3 different categories based on the essays we had.
Our book designer came up with the concept of 3 different sections because we wanted to find some cohesion in each section with the short stories.
So the first one is the gift of beauty. The second one is the human connection. And the third one is ensuring the future and helping people learn what they can do to make a difference.
So one of the real interesting short stories by Ryan Burnett, who works with Point Blue Conservation, is about the Rufous hummingbird and its epic migration from Mexico to its breeding grounds in Alaska. These birds have to have the flowers blooming at the right time on their migration, and climate change is disrupting this. And there's a wonderful short story in the book called Timing is Everything that talks about this bird's migration. This image of the Rufous Hummingbird was the probably luckiest, most fortunate image I've had while photographing just a botanical version of a flower. We were photographing the flowers. I had the right shutter speed. I had everything set up. I'm looking through the viewfinder. I have my finger on the remote release. I see the bird come in there. I get the picture. I get 2 frames. The bird goes. And so I got real excited. I looked in the back of my camera. I said, oh, great. Let's wait and see if the bird comes back. Well, we waited 20 minutes and nothing happened. So, this is one of my favorite images in the book. It's one of the luckiest images. I couldn't have planned this.
So one of the emphasis we have in the book is encouraging people to plant natives in their own yards. And so this is about a short statement by the National Wildlife Federation about pollinators. And we just loved photographing in the desert and didn't think people knew enough about the desert, and that there are actually 5 deserts in California, and 25% of California is desert. So Susan Twite wrote a wonderful short story about the California deserts.
So we'll go through some of the desert images later.
Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a Native American botanist and professor, wrote a wonderful story in What's in a Name. So there was a lot of thought about who to talk to and what topics they should write. And we also wanted to make sure we had diversity in our authors. That was very important to us. We're talking about biodiversity, but we also wanted a diverse group of voices. Wendy Tokuda, who many of you may remember, was a news anchor and is now an Advent restoration volunteer, and she wrote Zen and the Art of Broom Pulling.
It's a really humorous short story about one woman's war on invasive species.
And for those who want to know how to talk to children or other people about climate change, this was the one talking to children about climate change without scaring them.
This flower is called the candy flower, as you can see, and we found it out at Point Reyes.
We thought it was appropriate for the children's section.
Yeah, this was a last-minute entry into the book. I came across it and thought, oh my gosh, this has to be in there. It's so unusual.
So a story on seed banking. And then we want to introduce you to a series on fire and wildflowers.
How the environment recovers after a fire has gone through.
They can be so devastating to both plant life, animal life, and human life. But there is a bright side also.
Yeah, there's beauty in the recovery.
It allows wildflowers to get exposure to sun that they were missing while the trees and shrubs were taking over. And also the ash works as a fertilizer. So with the right conditions, you can have amazing wildflowers after a bloom. This is Lake County, for those who can't read the small type. And this is just 6 months after a devastating fire.
This was a huge manzanita bush that was just scorched, and this is everything that came back. Everything you see that's alive and growing, this whole area was just destroyed. So all these seeds were laying dormant, waiting for the fires.
Again, Lake County, another part of Lake County, another fire.
This was all burned. This was a meadow that was all burned.
So I just cleaned it out and everything came in new.
This meadow too. And this is an image of the Pepperwood Preserve in Sonoma County. You can see the burned out trees in the background. When I was photographing this, I looked at the soil, and the soil was all charred. It was almost black.
And this is the Tubbs fire, where all the houses that were burned in Santa Rosa.
And this is everything that came back. This was a flower. Oh, that's okay. This was in that same area. Nita found this. It was go back. We didn't put the flowers next to each other. We found them that way.
You have to go past.
Yeah. So we'll take you to some of our favorite images we've done in the desert. We've got to speed this up. So the first section is in Death Valley.
And one of the reasons we like the desert, again, is you have the geology as well as the plants. But I hate heat, so we always have to go when it's not too hot. This was Death Valley during the
1998
super bloom.
Back then, they were called 100-year blooms. These often happen during El Nino years.
And we always like to look for insects. And these crab spiders are different colors. So on a yellow flower, it'll be bright yellow.
And then Joshua Tree is another favorite place for people to visit to see wildflowers in a good year.
And it's very distinctive because it has this granitic soil.
Now, this is a normal desert wash. With a normal rainfall year, you'll see one or two or a few of these plants scattered throughout the wash. Well, in 1998, again, there was a super bloom, and in one of the desert washes, we came across all these beautiful Canterbury Bells.
And not only were there a lot of flowers, but there were also really big plants because it just kept raining, and so they just kept producing flowers. This is a fun flower to photograph, but you have to be careful because some flowers will close up at night. Well, this one starts at about 3 in the afternoon. So the first time we tried to photograph one in Death Valley, we didn't start early enough. And we've also had other flowers that actually will move towards the light of our reflector. And then another very famous place, is most of you have heard about, is Anza-Borrego.
Desert State Park.
Again, different plants in each desert. And this was a year where we spent 12 days in the desert, and 9 of them we had some rain.
No. Yeah, 12 days in Anza-Borrego.
Yeah.
And now back to Antelope Valley, California Poppy Reserve, where it all started. Now, this is one example of an image of a flower that was taken outside of the state. This was taken in Nevada, but this species lives in the state. So we probably have about 5 or 6 images that were taken in either Colorado, Utah, Washington, Nevada, Utah, but those species still live in the state. So we felt it was fair to represent them here.
And then we're going to have end with a series of 2-page spreads from the book.
This was serpentine background, which is the state rock, and this was in the Sierra Nevada foothills. We're really lucky to find some beautiful flowers right in front of the face of this boulder.
And there's a lot of serpentine in Marin County, especially up on Mount Tam as well. Table Mountain, which is also an amazing wildflower place near Chico. The flower on the left, we actually drove 150 miles to go see when we found out it was blooming and someone could show us where it was. It was really special. The mountain lady slipper.
It's part of the orchid family. This is another example of a flower that's found here. This was photographed on Mount Rainier in Washington.
Oh, this one on the left is the Tiburon Mariposa lily, which is only found on Ring Mountain and nowhere else in the world. And that's one of the reasons why Ring Mountain was saved and protected. And one of the things we wanted to add to the book was a glossary, because we knew that there were a lot of terms that people might not know that were used in the short stories, and also add to its educational value as a book. Oops. And then we also added 2 indices, one which is based on plant names and the other on locations. So if you're interested in finding out what in the book is on Mount Tam, you can go to the index and look up Mount Tamalpais.
So the purpose of the book was to inspire hope and action, use art to inspire hope and action.
And to attract attention with the images. We just love this quote by David Brower. So the book is, we have a regular edition book, and then we have this beautiful deluxe limited edition book, which comes with the clamshell box in the background and a cloth cover with a image in the front, as well as the regular edition book. And if you get the regular edition book, or you see it, pull back the dust jacket, and you'll find a surprise underneath, which is this book cover.
It's a California poppy that was taken out of Point Reyes.
So thank you for joining us on our 27-year journey to create Beauty and the Beast. And we understand that there is one book that the San Anselmo Library has purchased and will be available when they are giving out books again. And in the meantime, you can also purchase books at wildflowerbook.com. That's wildflowerbook.com. So thank you.
So if we have time, we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we have time, and I typed in the link into the chat. So if you want the link to the book, it's there as well. I forgot to do that earlier, but it's there now, everybody. I will unmute people. I've never actually done this part before. It's been either really quiet in Q&A, but I will unmute everybody. If you have a question, please feel free to, maybe we can start calling on you guys. I'm not sure, we'll figure it out. But if anyone has a question, I'm gonna unmute. Let me figure out how to do that. Okay.
Do you know that if people go to participants down below, they can actually raise their hands?
Oh, actually, you know what? Maybe if anyone has, since the presentation's over and we're not looking at the absolutely beautiful pictures anymore, how about people type in the chat box and we can do it that way? Would that work?
Or just put in there that they want to ask a question. And then
yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. If you have a question, type in the chat box and we can unmute you.
There's Jim Sugar.
Well, we're within time.
Yeah. But we need
let's see if anyone has any questions. We'll wait a little bit. So
the chat box and the participant, things are all at the bottom or the top of your screen. No questions?
No, okay.
Wait a minute.
All right. Well, I have I'd like to, oh, we have something in. Oh, it's so sweet. Everyone's being so sweet. Thank you. All right. Well, people are chatting. I just have a few more things I'd love to say. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to give a special thank you to Rob Badger and Nita Winter for talking with us tonight and sharing their photography. It really is amazing, and it was beautiful to see it on the screen. As I mentioned previously, as did Rob and Nita, this beautiful book is available to purchase at www.wildflowerbook.com. The Sand and Summer Library does have a copy of this book in our collection, and it will be available to request very soon. We will be starting our curbside services this Monday, June 8th. And we're really excited to be back and being able to share the collection of books with everybody. And I see there is a hand in, there is a question in the chat. So we are going to go over.
Can I just add one quick thing? That people can also, if they're interested in purchasing a book online, it can be picked up in Marin County safely from our home, and we can personalize them and sign them as well. And there's an option on Shopify for pickup.
Okay, it looks like Luz Elena Castro has a question. I'm trying to unmute you right now. There we go.
Well, I am walking, but I'm just so proud to see the work of my good friends Nita and Rob. Very powerful, amazing, and really intense, beautiful work. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Luz. Elena, we love you.
Thank you.
I love you too, guys.
Another
Excellent.
wonderful photographer.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so yes, there was a question about the recording. I did record it, and I will stop recording it very soon and upload it either tonight or tomorrow, and we'll send everybody the link to that.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, the 2 new messages. What have we got?
Oh, there's a message from Rhonda. Is there a website you recommend using for plant ID?
Yes, it's calflora.org, CALFLORA, Calflora. I think it's part of UC Berkeley. I think that's where it originates. And California Native Plant Society also has CalScape. That's CALSCAPE. We use CalFlora more. CalFlora shows not only the plant, but where it appears all over the state. So that's a great place to start.
And CalScape is also set up to help people figure out what kind of native plants to put in their area.
Oh, and we forgot to.
That we co-published with the California Native Plant
We
Society.
made a big boo-boo. And we always at the beginning thank California Native Plant Society for co-publishing with us. So I want to make sure that that gets in there.
And that there are native plant chapters, 32 California native plant chapters throughout the state. There are also, for those people who are not in the state, there tend to be native plant societies. But if you go to cnps.org, you can find a chapter near you. And Marin County has a very active chapter that meets on the second Monday of the month. Now they're doing Zoom meetings and presentations. They have one Monday night. Do you remember what the topic was on CalFlora?
Yeah.
Actually, so for those of you interested in learning how to use CalFlora, Monday night, if you search CNPS Marin chapter events, you can find out about that. And they also tend to show a lot of the different local plants that are found in Marin. So it's another good source to find, to help you identify plants.
Are the proceeds of the book helping any climate
There's a question about the proceeds of the book helping climate-related cause. We are creating an affiliate program so that organizations, especially environmental and climate change organizations, can help promote the book, and any sales that come through their connection, they will get a third of the book sale. And we would, at this point, love to give them more, but this was such an expensive book to put together that we haven't been able to raise that up, but it's still a significant amount. And so that affiliate program is getting put together. And if you know any organizations that might be interested in participating in that, feel free to contact us through the website. And you can also see other images I'm going to put on the chat at our other website, which is winterbadger.com. My last name is Winter, Rob's is Badger. We really lucked out, and we were able to do Winter Badger.
I'll also be sending out a thank you email to everybody with all of these links along with the recording. So hopefully I have them all correct. But if you don't have a chance to write them down from the chat, I'll be sending them out to everybody as well.
Great. So,
is any more questions before we end the meeting and the program tonight?
So I just want to add that the sale of the book also has helped us to cover some of the costs of putting the book together and allow us to keep doing the work that we're doing.
Well, it looks like there's another question in the chat from Christina Shelby. How can we help save wildflowers in California?
Well, the California Native Plant Society, if you want to do a donation, that's a really important organization.
Volunteer through them.
Yeah, there's a lot of volunteer, well, there were a lot of volunteer opportunities as far as going out and pulling invasives in order to protect sensitive habitats. They will open up again at some point in the future. CNPS is, as I said, a very active chapter and does a lot of that type of work. So any organization that's also helping with climate change is helping with land conservation, like the Trust for Public Land. All are organizations that do help wildflowers, not just in California.
One way you can help save wildflowers is if you've got any land or any space, if you can plant just a few native species that are local to your area, you will attract pollinators. There's a beautiful milkweed. There are different types of milkweeds that that butterflies like. So California Native Plant Society is a really good resource, but you can start just by planting natives in any space that you can. Again, the most important thing to do is to plant something that's native to your area, and that way you'll have all the right insects and all the right pollinators there that will help keep the plants going.
And the CNPS has a wonderful Facebook group as well. And a lot of people share what's happening both on the Facebook group and through Twitter in their own native plant gardens. So that's really fun to see.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And it's really a special thank you to Rob and Nita for putting on this wonderful event with us.
We were so happy to do this. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. And I hope to see you all in libraries very, very soon.
Great. Oh, there's Jim.
Right.